I didn't mean to interrupt you guys. Sorry about that. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode 70 of the Coffee Squad podcast. Jake is with me today. Still, thankfully, have somebody to talk to other than myself.
Man, you trying to off me? What's going on here?
Well, you know, you seem to get to go on a lot of trips that I wish I could go on. So,
oh yeah, yeah.
Today we're joined with Alec from Halo Privacy. Good morning, Alec. How you doing?
Hey, fellas. Thanks for the invite. Glad to be here.
All right. So Alec is the managing. I'm going to try to give you due props for you here, right? So he's the managing director of Halo Privacy, where he focuses on secure communications, identity and reputation management, investigations, and enhanced privacy services. He's a cryptocurrency enthusiast with particular interest in Bitcoin and Monero, and is a co-host of the Crypto Voices podcast. All right.
Dude, that's everything.
Awesome.
So what crazy because right before we went live, we were, there's always like a 2-minute thing. So Alec and I were just discussing cryptocurrency, the show, startup, and and mutual friends. So small world out there.
Yeah, I mean, can we call out Paul just in case we get him to listen? And
yeah, I mean, Paul better be listening.
Yeah, and he slipped me a 20 before, so I'm going to say good stuff. But if that hadn't happened, it would be the Paul Hatcher doesn't know what he's doing show.
Well, I mean, Paul slipped you a 20, huh? He didn't give me anything.
He gave you anything?
He gave me a hard time, so let me drop some nuggets here on Paul.
Checks in the mail, right?
Yeah. No, Paul, great dude, man. Yeah. Loved working with him. We had a great time over in Jordan together. So yeah. And I learned a lot fantastic about cryptocurrency from him. So
yeah. The thing about crypto people is they're super annoying, and so once you get them on that topic, they'll just I'm going to tell you about crypto.
Sort of like vegans, yeah, or seals.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know anything about it. Out there. Yeah. I know a buddy of mine is into Bitcoin. He started mining it at the very beginning, so he's got a pretty good setup. But I don't know anything about it. It's like him speaking Greek to me when he talks to me about it. I'm like, oh, okay. I really don't know. So,
but I think when we first were talking, Will, this is the guy you mentioned that got in pretty early and was evangelizing, and now he's just sitting pretty, right?
Oh yeah.
No, nice.
Yeah, when he's ready to retire and cash out, he'll be sitting pretty. So yeah.
I mean, I know we are way off subject, but that's okay. Sometimes we do this, but the way talking to people about crypto is it's changing, it's revolutionary, And you look about every few hundred years, there's something that comes along that's revolutionary, right? And that's where I think crypto is. I just saw China was about a month ago, was starting to crack down on crypto. But then you had El Sal and a few other South American countries no, we're going to use this as legal tender. And so what that does, to me is I think us in the Western society, going to a bank and having your money securely sitting inside a bank is no big deal. I've always grown up with it. I think everyone who's around today has grown up with that. But majority of the world, especially your third world countries, they don't have banks. They don't have a place to get a bank. So then how are you going to pay for certain things? And it's just, to me, it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to finally, was never interested until Paul, again, I was stuck in an apartment with this guy for 3.5 weeks. And that's all we would talk about. So I was kind of forced to listen to it. Felt like it's kind of like prison. I'm just kidding. I'm really kidding.
Yeah, but you're right. And I will not be the cause of us getting off, of course, but the Chinese cracked down on mining. So China, the preponderance of mining globally used to be in China because you could put it close to, cheap sources of power, hydroelectric, et cetera. And I don't think it's because the Chinese are anti-crypto. I think it's because the Chinese are we're going to do our own crypto, right? So we don't need this decentralized Bitcoin that we can't control. We're going to put out a central bank digital currency. And this is not speculation. They've already been testing it. And to me, it's just a further extension of the Chinese dystopian manipulation of data, right? So it's monetary surveillance, because if they print the money digitally, then they write the code behind it, then they can enforce the rules of it. So, and this is not crazy talk, right? I could imagine, hey, you've been loyal to the state this week, so you can spend $100 of your dollars on beer. right? But you've been bad, right? So we're going to tax you more, or you're not allowed to use cars or buy gasoline, or you can only buy bread, or just enforce like all sorts, or just completely ostracize someone, ice them out from the financial ecosystem. And that they would do domestically. But the other thing that would be likely is, so as they're doing this, Belt Road Initiative, and they're exporting yuan as well as infrastructure, it's like, here, take our money, we're going to build you a bridge. This currency there, and we're going to keep an eye on what your population's spending. So yeah, I mean, there's great like freedoms that are coming from the crypto world, but it could be easily turned on its head.
Yeah. Before we hop into our main subject, have you heard about the guy who has like, is it $1 billion of crypto, but he can't remember his password? He's only got 2 chances left. That's the scary part about it, is that you could lose all that money.
Yeah, it's a bearer asset, right? So bearer assets all come with that responsibility, whether it's gold, guns, diamonds, you name it. Bitcoin's one of them. So if you lose it, it's on you. No one's going to handle it for you. I mean, you could go to a third-party service for that, but to me, the value of it is that it's mine.
Yeah.
And so I'll take that risk. And if I've made mistakes before too, when I was learning. Fortunately, fairly inconsequential. But you just make a mistake, you mess up a private key, you send something incorrectly, and yeah, it's fairly unforgiving in that regard.
Well, it has to be too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I know we started off a little bit off topic, but today we are going to be speaking about infrastructure hacks. Essentially with the oil pipeline and the meat processing people that got hacked lately. I think I was reading something today that the voting is considered an infrastructure. So, a lot of speculation on whether our voting boxes and stuff like that can be hacked. So Alec is going to be talking with us about infrastructure hacks. So can you tell me exactly what is an infrastructure hack? Kind of explain what an infrastructure is, and then explain, what an infrastructure hack is.
Yeah, sure. So it's usually in the context of critical infrastructure, right? So it's like oil and gas pipelines, water, electricity, power grids, things that are underpinning some of our core functions as a society to distribute services and goods. And some of it's logistics, supply chains, all these things. And we saw it with the Colonial Pipeline attack. And, I, for one, was not aware how reliant the entire East Coast was on one pipeline. And so, this affected people further south, like I'm in Maryland, but you could drive 5 hours down to North Carolina, and it really was a shortage. Up here, it was just kind of a speculative shortage.
It was a panic-induced shortage.
Yeah,
it wasn't really because the pipeline was out; it's because people panic bought.
Sure.
That's at least, yeah. So,
but it was the panic was about the real possibility of an actual shortage, and so I guess. Are we glad that Colonial paid the ransom? I don't know. But to answer your question, so these infrastructure hacks tend to go after things where the disruption of services would be very noticeable and problematic, right? So like if Starbucks isn't able to pour drip coffee for a day, yeah, people are going to be a little annoyed, but it's not a big deal. But if power grids are affected, if the distribution of oil and gas are affected, these things actually have like societal breakdown causes or results. And so all the bad guys have to do is be right once. Someone has to click on some link somewhere, or put some USB into some port and execute something, right? That across these large infrastructure organizations that both have like headquarters and then distributed locations where they're managing substations or whatever it is. You just have to be right once, and that's why these things happen so often. It's not that these guys don't pay big money for cybersecurity. It's just that the tiniest little break in it can cause pretty massive disruption.
So I know that the city of Atlanta got hit, but probably about 10 years ago now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And hospitals have been targeted as well. So it can be, even though we think of infrastructure as power and stuff like that, it can actually be other companies and corporations, stuff like that as well, right?
Sure. Yeah. And so cities, Ukraine in 2015 had 2, pretty massive power grid attacks, but the OG attack was Stuxnet. So I think of it now. I think in popular opinion, this is like a kind of a Russian organized crime thing. But the NSA and the Mossad have never admitted it. But let's see who the likely adversaries to the Iranians are, and speculate that they were involved in Stuxnet. And Stuxnet was a brilliant infrastructure attack, right? So they had to go create 4 0 days, 4 never before seen pieces of code that were in Microsoft Windows. They had to go steal root certificates, physically steal root certificates, and then put it all into this code that was actually in the supply chain for Natanz, which is one of the nuclear enrichment facilities in Iran. And that entire facility runs on an air-gapped infrastructure. So air-gapped meaning it's not connected to the outside. So parts of it, the parts that run the centrifuges, are not connected to the outside internet. So how do you get some malicious code into a network that doesn't have any external ports? You have to literally take someone, the term of art is sneaker net it, right? Someone's got to walk it over and like somehow get it in there. And you either wittingly or unwittingly get someone to do that. And so not only was there like really impressive code and a really sophisticated supply chain attack, but they made that last hop in, and then it affected at the kernel level. So if you're at the kernel level, you can make the indicators read however you want because you actually control all of the systems in that network. And so the other thing that was brilliant is the folks that were monitoring the centrifuges had no idea what was going on because all the little green lights were exactly as they were supposed to be. And it wasn't until the centrifuge just started spinning so fast that they were breaking. And they were like, well, the meter says green, but that centrifuge just blew up. So something is going on here. And so the thing that I don't think that the good guys expected was that Stuxnet worm got out in the wild. And that's why we all heard about it, and it affected people in Europe and the US, and and it became kind of an international affair. But it was super effective at what it was designed to do, that's for sure. But that was a Western thing. And now it's kind of like an organized crime thing.
So it's kind of like a two-headed monster depending on if it's an internet or intranet type thing, right? So if it's internet, you can do it through a phishing campaign or a click link, but intranet, it has to physically be put in by something or someone. So it's got to be human error or human
malfeasance.
Malfeasance. There you go. Thank you. Those large words get me every time.
It's early, man. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And so this is kind of one of the issues with these attacks is, the low-hanging fruit is phishing attacks. Someone clicks on a link, click here. We think that there's something wrong with your bank account. That happens all the time. But you can enforce really, really excellent cybersecurity hygiene and have excellent monitoring tools. But ultimately, there's people involved. And so that's the issue, right? And if you are not able to pursue the low-hanging fruit attack, you could still go take some dude or dudette who's kind of lower on the pay scale and be like, listen, for $5,000, all you have to do is take this USB drive and take it to work tomorrow. And, just take this file and drop it on your laptop, something like that. That's not super hard either. And if you have an employee, a company that has 30,000 employees, one of those employees will do that, guaranteed.
Well, that's kind of a subject that we've talked about, Will, about insider threats and then convergence too.
That's actually what we're talking about next week.
So that insider threat of that disgruntled employee or that employee who I always use a bad analogy of like going through a divorce or overspending, financial type issues or just whatever, or hey, they just want $5,000 or $10,000, whatever the price is, they're willing to go do that. So that insider threats rule, and then that convergence, like you were saying, Alec, of you can have the best cybersecurity program, but if you don't have a good physical security program that's keeping, and you can have the best programs out there, but if you're not enforcing those SOPs and those policies and procedures that are created to protect, those programs are almost useless. And at the end of the day, it can cost billions of dollars to different organizations or state actors as well.
Oh yeah, and that kind of both having an insider threat, a robust insider threat program, and training your people that's hard, and it's hard to quantify, right? Like when the CISO is presenting to their board, they can present cybersecurity metrics fairly easily. The training stuff is like, the training, we did it, but it's hard to see what's taking, what's effective. And you only know it's working when you don't have attacks. And that's, it's the proving the negative problem. So it's I would not want to be a CISO at any of these companies, for sure. Really hard job.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Who do you think is kind of behind a lot of these attacks? Do you think it's just like a group of hackers doing it, like the one in Russia that did the pipeline? I can't remember their name. Or do you think it? Okay, and do you think it's like more state sponsored or a combination of both? Or
so I mean, some of these countries, the lines between organized crime and state sponsored are fairly blurry. Listen, it's opportunistic. There's money involved here. And so whether it's like the North Korean state telling, APT 28 or Lazarus Group that, thou shalt go steal crypto or money or identity information that we can resell in the dark net, or it's organized crime that's like, this is just how we fund our organization. They're going after money in the cases where it's opportunistic. That's just my opinion, but it's kind of borne out, right? They go for easy targets. They want to demonstrate that they can collect money, usually through like cryptocurrency ransom. But then they also, and this is the part that is a little less noticed, they will then take that data that they steal and sell it on the dark web. And sometimes they'll make more money that way than through the ransom. So if you're like, you may recall the Target ransomware attack, they stole some like 100 million user information files, right? So that was a bunch of credit card information and probably addresses and phone numbers and a bunch of PAI or PII. That stuff gets resold on the dark web all the time, and it gets used for more targeted attacks against people. And so you kind of get to double dip, right? You get the 5 million from Target, and then you get to resell it 50 times on the dark web. And so those are the opportunistic guys. On the critical infrastructure side, I would imagine there's probably also the state-sponsored interest, right? Because they're probably probing. They're like, hey, where are the weak spots? Like, if we ever had to launch a cyber attack against this country, how would we shut off the power? How would we shut off the, water? All these things. And so it may not be for a shock and awe now, but it's to understand like the weaknesses of this infrastructure, and that's pretty scary too. Yeah, so hopefully that answers the question.
Okay. I mean, if I was going to attack the U.S., I mean, not to give out any trade secrets or anything here, but you take out the pipeline and the power, and people are going to panic. The shortages of the supply line, and you're going to, I mean, just imagine. You look at what happens in like hurricanes, or even what happened with this last gas line. People were panic buying, and people revert to not being nice to each other, and the panic is causing as much or more damage than actual attacks do, I think.
Yeah, that's where you get that desired. This is totally in the Russian playbook, right? Where it's like you want to see societal degradation. You want to like prod at the weaknesses and create divisions and so like kind of miscontent in the country, and then you weaken that country from within, right? That's been their playbook forever.
Yeah.
I mean, Alec talking about power grids and Target. I mean, a lot of people. The only reason I know is because I did a cybersecurity course through Harvard. But the Target thing, that was done through a third-party HVAC system, and they got a backdoor in through there. And who would have thought, And so I think, as we talk about security a lot on this podcast, is know your vendors, know your vendors and know who's working with them, for them, and all that, especially if you're a large company. And then know your own vulnerabilities. And I think that was just a vulnerability that was just unknown at the time.
Yeah, the vendor thing. I mean, almost all of the recent, kind of publicized events have been some kind of supply chain, third-party vendor, somewhere downstream. That, like the SolarWinds one is a great example, right? They didn't go after the government agencies. They went after the, security software that was in the government agencies, and they started at a somewhat weaker entry point, and then it just escalated up. And I mean, if I had to guess, they were probably impressed with how successful they were on that. I don't know if they anticipated doing so well.
Yeah. Again, I don't think people realize like the little nuances. I think was it during Trump's administration, he banned the any infrastructure coming in from China for our electrical power grid, right? Because they're putting a back door in there, which could essentially shut down our electrical grid system. And so if you think about like shutting down our electrical grid system, shut down for a month or 2-3 months, you're talking millions of people dying just based off medicines and everything else that they can't have access to anymore. So
it'd be complete chaos.
It's amazing. Just the little pieces of equipment that we never think about, how they're all tied in.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm guessing you guys in your audience probably agree, but I really wish that we would be way more aggressive, both in like onshoring our supply chains and punching back. Like we have the guys, like there should be consequences for these attacks, and the consequences should not be, coming out and like strongly discouraging further attacks. The consequence should be like your life. I don't know about what kind of language I can use on this, but your life, if you're the bad guy, should be fucked up, right? Like we can do this. No one has better targeting resources than the United States. So you don't think we could go after 5, dudes in somewhere in, some former Soviet state and make their lives miserable? We could, right? Yeah. And so people should be shaking in their boots and go after the next country, right? But for some reason, we don't get aggressive on it. I don't know why.
When you just use strong language, it's like your parents, right? Stop it, Johnny. Stop it, Johnny. Stop it, Johnny. It's like Johnny never stops it, but you get the wooden spoon out and you whack it across his butt once or twice. And Johnny feels the pain of it. Johnny's going to stop doing what he's doing for a little while. And I'm not advocating here on the show, please, by any means, that you go out there and beat your kids.
There's a difference between punishment and abuse.
There needs to be consequences, like Alex is saying. And I would take it one step further. Like, you make it so severe that it makes, like you were saying, Alec, it makes them tremble. It makes them think twice. Like, oh man, not only go after the hacker. I have a demented mind, and everyone who knows me knows this, but go after their families too. Like, crush them.
Jake goes mafioso.
Crush them.
Dude, I love it.
That's just me. That's just me, though. But luckily, I'm not president or have a high power position. I'm just a security consultant.
But these attacks affect our families, right? So, I mean, come on.
I remember like during the Colonial pipeline, North Carolina, both Will and I. But I was getting like messages, oh, hey, this gas station has fuel. Never once did I worry about it. And I drive 2 gas guzzling vehicles. Never once did I ever worry about getting gas where I lived in North Carolina. But people did, gas stations would run out of fuel all the time. So there's the disruption in other people's lives, to me, is huge. And then my other thing is, what the hell's wrong with the U.S. where we only have one pipeline? We all know backup systems and everything else. That's on the cyber side. That's on the physical side. Why don't we, you have some of the best, brightest minds working in some of our government agencies. Why isn't this thought of them? And, and to me, it's all political hoopla garbage anyways.
It is garbage. And so the other thing that kind of makes us soft on this, and this has actually been, so I don't know if this was definitely told to me by someone in the cyber world, and it's probably been reported somewhere, but so most companies now, especially like the big publicly traded companies, they have cyber insurance liability policies underwritten by Lloyd's of London, right? And they pay for a certain amount of coverage. And so what has been discovered is that a lot of these attacks request the exact amount of ransomware coverage in their policy. So what they're assuming is, hey, the attack occurs, right? They go in, they search for the folder called insurance. They look up the cyber liability policy. Oh, they got $5 million in coverage. Okay, $5 million in Bitcoin is what we're asking for. And it happens over and over, right? So like these guys are smart and they know, okay, the company's either going to fight back and like do a whole thing, or they're just going to pay the $5 million because it doesn't even come off their balance sheet. And that's how they pay it.
The most of the ones that I've read, it seems like they end up paying it because they have the insurance policy they already pay for, so we might as well give them the money. We're covered, and then we get everything back. And then
totally, we can try to fix it, so if your policy is $5 million, the ransomware guys aren't going to ask for 20, because at 20 you're probably thinking of alternatives, but at 5 you're like, sure, okay, we're covered, right?
Well, there's rumors, and that's what I'll call it is rumors, that some of your K&R, kidnap and ransom companies, insurance brokerage, again, bad actors within inside there that will leak information and may conduct a kidnapping. And then they get the honeypot and they split it up, different ways across the board. So,
sure. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me at all, right? It's just a perverse incentive.
Yeah. Anything that can be exploited will be exploited at some point in time. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah. And so this kind of gets back to Colonial, right? But you guys probably read some of the coverage of it, and I don't know more than what is available publicly, but Colonial comes out, right? And they say they paid off the ransom, gas is flowing, everyone's like, great. And then their next iteration of the story is, we paid the ransom, but we didn't actually need to because we had all of our backups. And I'm like, okay. And then 2 weeks later, they roll up all these dudes, and supposedly the hackers are like, we're done with crime now. We're retiring, we're good. We paid off the people that wrote the code, and we're gonna go away. I'm like, that story sounds like bullshit.
Yeah,
right.
Something doesn't smell right.
Yeah, right. So you didn't need to pay it, but you paid it anyway, and the criminals just said, "We're sorry. We've done so well that we're done."
Yeah, BS, total BS right there. But hey, I like the story. It's good. I think it makes for a good movie, like a good Disney movie right there.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything that we can kind of do, or that I don't know, the country or whatever, other than punishing them? I think I agree with you. I think we should definitely go after them and make it costly to them to attack our infrastructure. But is there anything else that companies can do? Because like you said, a lot of it is vulnerabilities you really don't even know you have until it's exposed.
Yeah, so it's almost impossible to claim that you're completely protected, but I would say there's two things. So one, you want to have a decentralized approach to cybersecurity. So a lot of cybersecurity tools are protecting core central infrastructure. That's cool. That's very necessary. But the problem isn't the tool, it's the core central infrastructure. So, someone's going to figure out an exploit, someone's going to figure out a way around, someone's going to, take a human approach, whatever. But if you don't have all your crown jewels together, it makes it a harder target. So maybe like one part of your company is affected, but not all parts. And then the second thing is you need to have a very capable and robust ability to fail over, because this stuff doesn't affect you nearly as much if you're just like, oh, okay, primary is down, but we're on secondary. And then, you can deal with primary, right? But you're not in this kind of emergent state where you don't deliver services or, whatever the outage is not affecting your company and your user base. But that's easier said than done. And it's costly, and no one wants to pay for two of something when you already have one of it that's expensive. But I would say it's probably less expensive than the eventual ransomware attack and the kind of reputational fallout that comes from it. So the attack is expensive, and then the big companies are like, well, did people stop shopping at Target because of our attack? Probably not, but it really wasn't good for their brand. We're still talking about it 4 years later.
Well, look at Sony Pictures Entertainment. Sony. Lazarus Group, supposedly did that with the movie that was coming out about North Korea.
Yeah, it was with
the interview. Seth Rogen,
yeah. So if you look at what happened, most people just know of the attack and what happened, but the fallout of that was like emails weren't used for months. There was a shut down Sony Pictures Entertainment for such a long time before they could get up and running. And I think to Alex's point is, have a backup plan, and not just have a plan. And we talk about this on the physical security side as well. Always having backups and plans, but then test them. It's one thing. It's kind of like an evacuation plan. Mm-hmm. An evacuation plan is great if it's written out. hey, you're one step ahead than someone else. But unless you test that evacuation plan and actually go through it, you're not going to know does it really work or not. And I think that's one thing that I noticed with a lot of companies is the testing of their plans, their secondary, their backup plans. The lack of testing that's there, it's kind of scary a little bit.
I think it's just like physical security. Once they feel like they've got it in place, they're all safe and cozy and, oh, we're good. And then, I don't know how often do you think they should audit their system? Like every 6 months, every year?
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on if you're an auditing company or not. But so I think you guys are spot on. I'd actually be more interested in testing the human side of it regularly. We're just going to have a quarterly, ransomware or other cyber incident test. Then the audits are cool, right? But the audit's going to find issues if it's a good audit because no one's operating perfectly. But I love this kind of parallel to the physical world because you guys are probably like me. And, at home, I have redundant functions. I still rely heavily on grocery stores, and I'm not like a prepper or anything, although I totally admire that lifestyle. But, I have little kids, I have a wife. And so I'm thinking we got to have some things at this house to make sure that in the event that we can't rely on some of the things we normally do, that, we're not stuck. And we're not going to be able to survive forever, right? But let's think about these things. And it should be the same in your cyber practices, right? How are we going to function in an emergency? So let's have some redundancy, let's have some failover, let's have some backup, let's have some planning, let's have some out-of-band communications too. Because, when the comms down, where are you going to go? Do we all meet? If there's no plan to go meet somewhere else, virtually to communicate, then you're kind of out of luck. And this happened with Sony too. So the Sony breach occurred, and then the attackers watched Sony respond to it from inside their network, and they were keeping tabs on them. Who's emailing who? What is the response? What vendors did they bring? And all of that is data too. So the post-breach data loss was actually significant as was the kind of pre-breach or during breach.
Yeah. So I think let's talk about you mentioned secure kind of communications, right? Let's talk about a little bit about Halo, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Of that being a secure type of comms. I know a little bit about it again through Paul. Paul, you're getting lots of love today, man. But yeah, kind of talk about that, and how that kind of works.
Yeah. So Halo is, listen, there's a lot of secure communications options out there, and you guys will probably agree, like you need a PACE plan, right? So it's your primary, your alternate, your contingent, your emergency. So you shouldn't have just one communications option. And so, Halo is not the panacea. It's not the kind of one-stop fixes everything. But our approach is to be really heavy on the obfuscation and managed attribution side. So we want our customers and ourselves to be really hard to hunt and really hard to find before you're, trying to penetrate the cryptography. Because it's pretty easy to get really good cryptography, and you can actually download it for free in the App Store. Wicker has great cryptography. Signal has great cryptography. WhatsApp actually has pretty good cryptography. They use the Signal Open Whisper libraries. And that's cool, but all of that, first of all, has a particular signature, and it's easily identified as, yep, those people are using secure comms. And the more it becomes ubiquitous, the better. But there's a reason that the Emiratis can block Signal. It's because it has a unique network signature, and so you just kind of block that particular. What they're doing is they're blocking axolotl, which is the key exchange. And so what we want to do is look like all regular communications, completely blend in. We want to look like Netflix traffic or bank traffic, everything else, so that we blend into the noise. And then below that is where the special sauce occurs. And so we spend a lot of time on that outer managed attribution defense. And then there's a ton spent on kind of the core cryptography and hardening. But we'd rather no one ever got to the point of knocking on that door, because they walk by because it looks like every other house. So that's kind of our philosophy. And the underpinning belief is that secure communications is kind of one of the pillars of liberty, right? Like I need to be able to communicate securely, not because I'm hiding something, but because it's part of like being private. And not having something to hide doesn't mean you should share everything. I don't really have anything to hide either, but I still really appreciate cryptography, secure communications, financial independence, like all these things that matter to me, because these are values of mine, not because these are like, I'm hiding some dark life. And, some people are going to hide a dark life with these tools, but that does not mean the tools are bad.
Yeah. What is it? You shouldn't sacrifice your freedom for safety. So,
right. Yeah, that's a tough one. Not everyone agrees with that.
No, yeah.
I mean, you look at shortly after 9/11, the Patriot Act, and I don't want to get in politics here at all, because that's not what this podcast is about. But the Patriot Act, was how far do you go?
Mm-hmm. So I think didn't Ron Paul say that the more benign sounding the name of the act, probably the more nefarious it is? So you've got like the CARES Act or the Patriot Act. I mean, who could argue with that, right?
Yeah. It sounds patriot. We're taking care of our country.
Right. It must be good.
Again, it's well intentioned, but at what cost?
Well, it's everything well intentioned is controlled by man who isn't. So,
Will the philosopher. I like it. So back to Halo real quick. Like, who should be using that? Are we talking like corporations that, international type corporations that, let's say, you have a company in China, right? A U.S. owned company in China, and they want to share files back and forth. Is that what we're kind of talking about, or kind of what's your target audience? Anybody, everybody?
Yeah. So China's difficult, right? Because they design their entire infrastructure, their entire internet infrastructure to mitigate these type of tools, not just Halo, but anyone who's trying to have private communications. So I'm actually a little wary of things that do work there, because I would assume that they're working because they're permitted. But yeah, so the answer is, people who have a reason to value privacy. And, we're unfortunately not, like, you can download Signal for free, and we're not in that kind of freeware category. But people who have a need for privacy and wherein the loss is financially consequential, and therefore they're willing to pay for something that is kind of a little more custom or bespoke. And so that could be family offices, it could be businesses, or it could be business units. A lot of times it'll be a bigger company, and they're not going to buy 10,000 licenses from us, but maybe it's the mergers and acquisitions team or the R&D team, wherein like if that new product gets out too early, it's going to be a $20 million loss or $100 million loss. Mm-hmm. Those are our types of folks. But we also have some individuals, and we love working with them too, because usually if there's an individual that's approaching us for their family or, for whatever their inner circle is, they're doing that because they're like-minded and they really care about their privacy. And so I'll spend all day, every day with those folks because usually we're starting at a point of kind of common ground.
Yeah. So those kind of individuals are more like your ultra high net worth individuals who kind of want to be on the grid, but off the grid at the same time.
Yeah. And so this is one of my beliefs, right? So privacy does not mean hiding. So like you guys, right? We're on this podcast and, we're streaming the video and this is great. Like these conversations should be out there. And I don't want to live, kind of fully off the grid in the sense that no one knows who I am and I have no outreach to the external world. But I also don't want my home address and my cell phone number and where my kids go to school and all that stuff. Like I want to split those things up. And so what I would say is figure out, what your public persona is if you want one. And at what level, and have that just abstracted away from your personal information and your family's information. You can totally do that. It takes a little work, right? No one's going to do it for you. There isn't an app or a button to push, but you can do it.
Awesome. I think this is a great conversation. You have any more questions about infrastructure, Jake?
So I kind of mentioned like the Harvard cybersecurity course. And I just kind of fell across that because I knew cybersecurity was one of my weaknesses, and I just want to learn more about it. Alec, you being in the industry, what do you recommend for a security professional that wants to learn more about cybersecurity, or let's just say your average Joe that wants to learn more about how they can protect themselves and their families? Is there courses that you recommend?
Yeah, so there probably are many great courses. Here's what I recommend. Become a hobbyist and a practitioner. So whatever your interest is, try that at home, whether it's some privacy techniques or just set up your home network in such a way that it's, more hard and figure out how to configure your firewall. These little things that actually force you to understand some stuff and to do it yourself. I think, listen, I'll speak for myself. I learned best in that DIY environment. And so, yeah, there could be a great lecture, but, give me like that same hour of just, in my basement, kind of getting frustrated with like, where does this go? And like, why, because nothing works seamlessly. And so kind of being in the weeds on it is where I've tended to learn, and then implementing that stuff in my personal life. So implementing, good cyber hygiene, and implementing good privacy policies or practices, implementing, secure comms, all that stuff is how I've learned.
Yeah. I would say also like, Michael Bezell, he has that open source Intel techniques. I have the book sitting right here. And then there's a podcast that comes out too. And that's a really good one that I like to listen to.
So I have extreme privacy just on the other side of my laptop here too. And I love Mike Basil's podcast. I have both his books in my office. And that's actually one of my practitioner things. I'll go through his book and take a section and just kind of like do like, oh, today I'm going to learn about disinformation. So I'm going to, implement some of that in my life, and then, something else. But yeah, I think that's how, that is how I learn. And there is a tangible result for me thereafter. So I'm actually implementing something that has a material impact versus a course, which is great. This is not anti-course, but you take the course and it doesn't change anything in your life. It just gives you some knowledge.
Yeah. And I would say it was like the Harvard course was just, it was more for executives.
Yeah.
To give them kind of a baseline understanding of like, these are things you should think about. And so as I go and talk to the CISOs and the C-suite, just so I have a better understanding, is why I took it. I'm not advocating for the Harvard course, but it was definitely a good course for someone like me who was a nug.
Was? What do you mean was?
Well, hey, I'm a little more sophisticated now. You see my San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge shirt on. I combed my hair this morning. Actually shaved the beard off like 2 weeks ago. So, hey.
You guys know San Francisco is too dangerous to go to, right?
Yeah. No, I don't. I was just talking. I'll be out there again. But,
there's some failed policies maybe going on there.
You think? I'm going back out to California again tomorrow. So,
nice.
I'm out there quite a bit. So.
No politics, right? This is just.
Yeah, no, you see it. You see it. So,
well, why don't you tell us where we can find you at, Alec, if somebody wants to follow you or listen to your podcast or anything like that? So,
yeah, I love it. So, I co-host the Crypto Voices podcast, and was kind of the more recent addition to that. My co-host Matthew Majinskis started it in 2016, and then we have another co-host named Michelle, and he's super private, so that's all we get on Michelle. Then I, write some occasional stuff on Medium, and I think you guys put the link there. Yeah, thank you. Just generally on privacy, usually ranting. And then haloprivacy.com, managing director there. And so, always welcome connecting with people there. Although, as one of my friends says, if you're going to hit me up cold on a medium where we've never connected, I'm probably going to be skeptical. Yeah. So you got to at least say that I'm friends with Jeff and Will or something.
Well, awesome, Alec. Thanks for the time, man. Good bunch of information, man. I always enjoy it. It's again, the circles are small out there, so we'll definitely be in touch more.
Yeah, this has been great. This is actually super fun to hang with you guys.
I appreciate you coming on. Check us out at the coffeesquadpodcast.com. You can get all our content there, or you can go to our YouTube channel, search Coffee Squad Podcast, will pop up. Like, follow, subscribe, give us comments, let us know how we're doing or any other future episodes you want to hear. Appreciate you stopping by. Jake, it's good seeing you. Have a good time out there in Cali land. Try not to get in too much trouble. I know how you are. So
yeah, no cops. I'm usually good. Usually good.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Hey.
Cheers, guys.